What a total treat to be in Indiana and to see all my old friends and colleagues from the Child Care Resource and Referral System and from Evansville-Vandenberg School Corporation. Really an honor. My job is to share a little research about the brain science and what it means for our workforce development. Share a little bit about executive functions of the brain. Don't worry, we won't bore you too bad, hopefully. And then share with you Mind in the Making, which is the 7 essential life skills that every child needs. The first 5 years, trillions of neural connections are made, forming the foundation for future learning. I'm going to show you a quick little snippet from Dr. Wong out of Princeton University.
Babies give us the impression of not knowing very much because they can't talk. And so they don't have the tools to communicate with us. But that doesn't change the fact that they are constantly learning. We are big brain animals and we get to be pretty smart, but babies are born with the following challenges. Nearly all of their neurons are born, so they have those, but they don't have the connections yet. So their connections between neurons, those are called synapses, are forming. But the big challenge is that they don't know what kind of world they're coming into. We're able to live on every continent. We're able to live in hot weather, cold weather, all kinds of conditions, urban, rural, whatever it might be. And these babies have to learn all those conditions. They have to learn languages, they have to learn social customs, and so on. And so they have to be able to adapt to a wide variety of circumstances. Most of those synapses are formed after birth because the baby's brain grows from 1 pound to full size. And so about 2/3 of those connections, net, get formed in 5 years. 5 years turns out to be about 160 million seconds. And so every second of that baby's life, it has to form some fraction of those 700 trillion connections. So 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. Okay, in those 3 Mississippis, there was a net growth of about 12 million synapses in what developmental biologists call a progressive event, and then unforming in what are called regressive events. And so there's this constant construction project where babies and small children are putting together the basic foundations for who they're going to become later. And to make an analogy, it's like constructing a house. And if you think about all the things that babies have happen to them, where we feed them, we love them, we talk to them, they have other experiences with other kids, whatever it is that they encounter, all of those are learning experiences. And so every interaction you have with a child, from infancy onward, is an experience that could potentially shape those tens of millions of connections per second that are being formed and unformed. And that house gets built. A lot of brain development is in the baby's hands in the sense that babies come out of the womb, they're born into the world ready to learn almost immediately. And so certain things get built very early on. Social models in the first few years of life, children learn to be social. They learn to have basic interactions with adults and with other children. Babies, even as early as a few months of age, can distinguish different sounds. And so when you say to a baby, ba, 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 and then you say da, the baby goes whoop and sees that there's something new that gets said. And it's approximately more or less the first 6 years of life when there's really the most plasticity. There's this constant churn where basically there are these construction crews inside the kid's brain, building synapses, taking out unwanted synapses. It's the most unbelievable construction project. And it's happening just, you think the kid is just drawing on the wall or fighting with another kid or eating a slice of pizza or whatever. All that is a learning experience that's driving that biological process. One thing that neuroscience can really offer is that being able to visualize what's happening inside your child's brain gives you something to think about, an image that you can hold in your mind as you think about what's happening in the baby's brain. I mean, I have a 6-year-old, and when I watch her play, fool around, when I make faces at her and so on, occasionally I stop and think as a neuroscientist about all the things that are happening in her brain. And I feel like where she's in front of me, I don't know, spitting up a banana or whatever, sure, that was the thing that it looked like she was doing. But one thing that occurred to me during all that time is, man, every second of that time, she was forming millions of synapses. In actual fact, there's an amazing thing happening inside her head. And so I think neuroscience is useful for that reason, just to help understand the biology and also give us a thing to think about as we watch our children grow.
So we'll start the hour saying that that's one of the top neuroscientists in the country, and basically saying that the brain is built upon relationships and in the context of the environment. And so while we can turn to the science, we have to really turn to the relationship to make the science and the development worthwhile. This is a quote from Jack Shonkoff out of Harvard at the Center for the Developing Child. When we talk about how the environment affects young children, we're really talking about, most importantly, the human environment. We're talking about relationships. There is no healthy social, emotional, and cognitive progression in the absence of relationships. There is no development without relationships. One of the key parts of developing that relationship is called serve and return. You may have heard serve and volley, but what it is, it's a back and forth. So what we don't want our country to do anymore, or even the world, is just drown children in language. You know, we've heard about the 30 million word gap, that children in poverty go to school with much less words than children in middle or upper class families. And that's true, but what happened was we just started drowning words, talking. And what we really want to do is be having a back and forth conversation. The big discovery is the Broca's part of the brain, that the baby's actually visualizing the language before they can articulate it. A lot of people started telling parents, don't talk baby talk to your baby, and actually babies learn language better by the sing-song, how are you today, like Patricia said, but that it's grammatically correct. But what trumps grammatically correct, for example, with one of my grandbabies, if she goes ah, I'll go ooh, and ah, and we do a back and forth. So I don't have to say, oh, I see you're saying ah, right? So you do a back and forth, and then once they start the language, you can do the sing-song, and they'll be able to acquire it a little bit more. So the Broca's part of the brain, the parenties, and most importantly, and there's a lot of really seasoned early childhood professionals in the room as I look around, that I remember when I was an undergrad, Newsweek came out with the picture of the brain on the cover of the magazine, and it said, you know, the baby's like a sponge, and they showed the research. Well, we need to do away with that analogy now, that the baby's brain is not a sponge. The baby's brain is built for action, and the number one action that we need to be taking is that back and forth in the context of a relationship. And now I bring you to executive function. And don't worry, if you don't know what it is, you will. So here are the 4 pillars of executive function, which occurs in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. But the brain is all interconnected. So one really key message that Ellen and I have been working diligently with our nation's leaders is that we really want to get away from, there's social, emotional, and then there's cognition, are often referred to as hard skills, which would be cognition or academics, and soft skills, which are often referred to as the social emotional, because neuroscientists after neuroscientists have proven that they're all hard skills. They're completely intertwined in the brain. So one good talking point as you go and you start making policy and you're advocating for children is that we cannot separate social emotional from cognition. They're all very, very important. So here's the pillars of executive function. One is focus. Being able to pay attention, stay on task, follow rules when you don't really want to. Working memory, being able to keep information in mind and use it, whether it's mental math or past experiences and conversations. Cognitive flexibility, being able to adjust to shifting needs and demands, being able to take in that information and think about it in new ways and apply it in different ways. And then inhibitory control, which is being able to resist the temptation to go on automatic and do what we need to do to achieve our goals. Really think about somebody in your life who's struggling, somebody you know who's really struggling in one way or another. It usually comes down to one of these components. And then if you think of somebody who's really living their best life, whatever that would be for them, they're probably pretty good at executive function. So these are very, very important skills. The good news is it's never too late. We can always get better at them. So as children grow older, this cognitive flexibility, working memory, focus, and inhibitory control actually lead into reflecting, analyzing, planning, and evaluating, right? All of which we need to be really high-functioning adults and get our goals achieved and meet academic standards. Right, the way that the country has moving with the academic standards, you used to learn a lot of things, just a little bit about them. And now as we've revamped them, we're going deeper, crossing knowledge and applying it. And without executive function, it's going to be very, very difficult for our kids to meet the standards.
Executive function is one of these broad umbrella concepts because it's defined behaviorally in terms of what it is that people do.
What number comes after the number 10?
It requires being able to keep information on mind.
11.
Being able to remember the particular context, being able to think flexibly, and it requires being able to inhibit a tendency to do what one has done before.
Executive functions are what you need when you have to concentrate, when things are difficult, when things are unusual, when things are changing. If you look at what predicts how well children will do later in school, more and more evidence is showing that executive functions actually predict success better than IQ tests. Typical traditional IQ tests measure what's called crystallized intelligence, which is mostly your recall of what you've already learned. What executive functions tap is your ability to use what you already know, to be creative with it, to problem solve with it.
Is it gonna go down?
So it's very related to fluid intelligence, because that requires reasoning and using information.
If you ask teachers what it is that they think is the most important determinant of whether or not children are going to perform well in the context of their classroom, they talk about children's ability to pay attention and to control their behavior, and all the kinds of things that executive function, in terms of this deliberate, goal-directed problem solving, is important for.
Executive functions involve the prefrontal cortex of the brain and several other brain regions that work in concert with the prefrontal cortex to make executive functions possible. This part of the brain is one of the last to develop, so executive functions emerge during the preschool years and into adulthood. They include a number of key aspects.
There's working memory, which is holding information in mind and working with it.
8.
How many?
10.
10.
Cognitive flexibility, being able to think about something in a new light.
There's no more T there. He's replaced it with a H. Tell us the new word.
Hall.
Inhibitory control. So you want to inhibit distraction. There's also inhibition at the level of behavior.
No one in the house but me, I know.
Where you want to resist doing what might be your first impulse, but would not be the most appropriate or the best thing to do in that moment.
Simon says, put your finger on your nose.
Because inhibitory control and the other executive functions are so critical to learning, researchers are looking at ways to help children improve them. And while executive functions emerge on a developmental timetable in children, their use must be promoted. In this example of promoting executive functions in a developmentally appropriate way, Adele Diamond of the University of British Columbia shows a child a picture of the sun and asks him to say night when he sees it. This task is used to assess executive functions. When she shows him a picture of the moon, he should say day or morning.
What do you say when you see this?
Day.
Yes. And what do you say when you see this?
Night.
Yes.
Day.
The little boy is going on automatic and making mistakes.
Morning. Night.
He was rushing himself.
Morning.
He wasn't taking the time he needed.
Morning.
But giving him time to stop and think helps.
So what I did was to sing this little ditty. Think about the answer, don't tell me. You might think that it's interference, but instead it gives him the time to figure out the answer. Now can you tell me? What do you say?
Morning.
Think about the answer, don't tell me now.
Night.
So what this is an example of is how we need strategies to help employ our executive function for ourselves as adults, but also knowing our own strategies so we can promote it in children to see what they're doing. So executive function life skills are important to school readiness and to school success. This is a study by Jeannie Brooks Gunn at Columbia University, and she found that attention skills allow children to focus on something in a way that maximizes the information that they get out of it. Executive function life skills are important in addressing high school success. Delayed gratification in preschool is a precursor of these skills years later, and I'll show you a little research when we get to focus and self-control about how important it is Executive function life skills are important in addressing college success and the graduation rate. And this is a study by Tanji. Self-control predicts college students' grades, fewer impulse control problems, better adjustments, and better relationships. So the good news is we can promote these skills. One aspect of executive function skills in 4-year-olds is attention span persistence. Is strongly predictive whether or not these same children graduated from college when they were 25 years old. This is a study from Megan McLennan out of Oregon State University, who worked with us closely in Evansville on our study. And it was so significant that children who are rated 1 standard deviation higher on attention span persistent at age 4 had almost a 50%, so 48.7% greater odds of completing college at age 25. Executive function life skills are important to workforce readiness and workforce success. Executive functions are predictive of physical health, substance dependence, criminal convictions, and personal finances achieved at age 32 after, now this is huge, this is one of our favorite studies, after controlling for socioeconomic status and IQ. So if we're going to make a difference in school readiness, school success, and workforce readiness, executive functions are a good place to intervene. They're not the silver bullet. You still need content, and you still need, the relationships and all of the other things. But this is one component of the way that we develop as humans that really can be honed in on to make a huge difference. So focus and self-control is exactly as you would say. It's the basis of the 7 life skills. It's being able to stay on task, to pay attention, to remember the rules, follow the rules. We're going to watch, this is like the quintessential child development research on inhibitory control. But what I want you to do is think about a time that you try to inhibit yourself, whether you're going on a diet or trying to stay on budget, and look at the strategies that the kids are using in the video that you also may use in your own life.
This is a bell, okay?
It's called the marshmallow test.
One goes.
We try to set up situations in which young children make a choice between 2 of something that you prefer later or 1 of something that you prefer a little less now.
If you had to choose, would you like to have 1 marshmallow?
Yeah.
Or would you like to have 2 marshmallows?
The whole point of the experiment is to set up an intense conflict between the 2.
Now here's how we play this game. I'm gonna leave the room. While I'm gone, if you can stay here and wait for me to come back without eating the marshmallows, then you get 2 marshmallows.
Okay.
But if you don't want to wait, you can make me come back right away
The bell.
by pressing the bell. But then you get 1 marshmallow, not 2 marshmallows.
I won't ring the bell.
You won't ring the bell? Okay.
The conflict for the child is very heavy, is that about half will go one way and half will go the other.
Oh, you made me come back.
It's like a little window into willpower. 4 dilemmas that everybody faces.
I wonder what's taking her so long.
What we found is a very simple and direct way of measuring a competence that seems to make an important life difference. The longer they were able to wait at age 4, the better the ratings of their ability to control themselves and to pursue their academic and other goals.
Please come back.
The kids who are able to delay gratification are increasingly learning ways of managing frustration, ways of managing distress. In middle life, there's less drug use, higher educational level attainment, much less likely to have lowered self-esteem, to engage in bullying behavior with other people. Correlations are clearly statistically significant, but that in no way means that a youngster who at age 4 didn't wait a long time is in any way doomed.
Guess how long the kids had to wait? Well, yell out if you... 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes. They had to wait 15 minutes. Yeah. And almost half waited. Yeah, at 4. Right? So during the really funny part of the video, the research has cited that the kids who could wait did better, with relationships, income, educational attainment, less likely to be involved in bullying, higher self-esteem. So all the things that we want for ourselves and for our kids, right? But the really most hopeful thing is that I told you in the very beginning, it's all about strategies. And the hopeful thing is that strategies can always be learned. Right? That's why we're trying to equip adults to know what their own strategies are so they can see it in the children and then promote what the children are naturally doing to manage themselves. So the second life skill, and each life skill builds on the previous one. So focus and self-control is like your basis of executive function and life skill. The second one is perspective taking. And you might automatically think, as I did when I first learned about Mind in the Making, it's empathy. And empathy is a part of perspective taking, but more importantly, perspective taking is being able to get in the heart and mind of somebody else, even if you don't feel what they're feeling. Empathy is I can feel what you're feeling. Perspective taking is I don't necessarily have to feel it, but I can inhibit my own thoughts and my own feelings and think about what another person might be thinking and feeling. One way we can promote this, there's all different ways, and that's what we do, go around training teachers and parents about promoting this skill, is really giving children an opportunity to pretend and to be in plays. So whether it's dramatic play in the classroom, theater arts program, pretend at home, switching roles, because think about it, when you're acting or you're in another role, you're learning the perspective of somebody else. What the research has found is that kids that are better at perspective taking are much less likely to get involved in conflict. The third life skill is communicating, and you automatically may be thinking reading, writing, and talking, and those are all true. Those are key parts of communicating. But the little twist on this one, based on the research, is us helping children to really think about what they want to communicate. Which is a really high-level skill. And as I was starting to learn about the skills of my own life, if you think about it, you need perspective taking, right, to be able to inhibit your own thoughts and feelings, and then think about what the other people might be thinking and feeling, and then basing your communication on that. The next skill is making connections. And making connections really is based on symbolic representation, the ability to have a stand-for relationship. We learn almost everything we know, it really comes from symbols. And the ways that kids really make those connections is through experiences and relationships. So how many of you have gone to a foreign land, and the first thing you're trying to do, if you don't know the language, is try to see something familiar so you can make a connection with what you already know. And that's what our charge is as educators and community leaders, is to be able to provide those environments and those experiences for children to make as many connections as possible and new connections. So the next life skill is critical thinking, and really it is to make sure that we have valid and reliable knowledge. How important it is for us to really intentionally teach children critical thinking through the scientific method, through asking questions and using that stepping back, which is all inhibitory control, working memory, and cognitive flexibility, to really make sure that we have the right information. So another factor that matters, the factor that matters are things that you can do to promote this life skill. So one, don't answer all the questions right away. You become curious and a lifelong learner yourself. And then helping children create questions to create experiments to their own questions. So how can we figure it out? What can we do? And then the seventh skill is taking on challenges. Taking on challenges is, yes, there's stress. There's always going to be stress. Not all stress is bad. In fact, some stress is good because it helps us learn to be capable and manage ourselves. But stress is usually reactive. Something happens to us and we have to react to it. Taking on challenges is really about choosing to do something hard. So the number one factor in helping children take on challenges is trusting relationships and helping them learn to weather stress. And then the last skill is self-directed engaged learning, which I often refer to as the highest hanging fruit. That would mean that all the kids had all these great reasons for going to school and learning and making a contribution and being excited to learn.